Hello, my name is Ayiana Crabtree, and I am the Karp Library Fellow XR Researcher for Studio X, the hub for extended reality at the University of Rochester. During the spring 2022 semester, I focused my research on XR and Accessibilities.
I started out by doing research for a resource guide to post on the Studio X blog. Technology in general creates many barriers for disabled users. As XR technologies are rapidly growing in popularity, they exacerbate these challenges. When creating an XR product, whether that be a VR, virtual reality headset, or an AR, augmented reality, game, etc., people tend to think more about their product's aesthetic or its usability for the average user. What people fail to remember is that not every user will be the average user. The world is a diverse place, with people of all ages, genders, races, and abilities, and when creating XR, it is important to keep in mind this diversity. XR and accessibility is itself a new area that is a moving target. Accessibility is the ability to access something and be able to benefit from its intended purpose. It sometimes refers to specific characteristics that products, services, and facilities have that can be used by people with a variety of disabilities. Accessible design is a design process that specifically considers the needs of people with disabilities. Universal design is the process of creating products that are accessible to people with a wide range of abilities, disabilities, and other unique circumstances. I focused on several topics to ensure I got a variety of resources that would be useful to a wide range of users. The topics were education, design, UI/UX, development, software, and hardware. I put together an accessibility guide for the Studio X webpage full of the various resources I found. Here's a select few from each category. Education, DLF Toolkit. Put together by the Digital Library Foundation, the DLF Toolkit puts together a series of lesson plans that facilitate interdisciplinary work engaged with XR technologies. The toolkit is focused on a decolonial, anti-ableist, and feminist pedagogical framework for collaboratively developing and curating humanities content for emerging technologies. XR Access. XR Access is a community committed to making virtual, augmented, and mixed reality accessible to people with disabilities. Their mission is to modernize, innovate, and expand XR technologies, products, and content, and assistive technologies by promoting inclusive design in a diverse community that connects stakeholders, catalyzes shared and sustained action, and provides valuable, informative resources. The site provides a plethora of materials for those interested in their efforts. Design UI/UX. Why VR and AR developers should prioritize accessibility in UI/UX design. An important thing that this article touches on is how a lack of accessibility in VR can make people feel left out or ignored. There is a huge importance in having a diverse group of people in your testing groups to ensure that people of all genders, ethnicities, abilities, socioeconomic backgrounds, and other identities are able to interact with your product with ease. It may be impossible to accommodate every unique circumstance, but taking diverse voices of others into consideration while making your product will ensure a better end result. While it may be a little more time to try to make sure everyone is included, the end design will be more profitable and beneficial to a larger community, which is most important. Development. The development category provides a range of guidelines put out by various companies that all relate to keeping accessibility in mind while developing games and other experiences. These include the W3C Accessibility User Requirements, Oculus's Accessibility VRCs, and Microsoft's Accessible Mixed Reality Initiative. Software. Walkin VR add-on makes VR more accessible to disabled gamers. This article talks about Walkin VR, a custom locomotion driver for Steam VR applications. The application introduces 4 new features for those with disabilities. The 4 features, Virtual Move, Motion Range Boost, Hand Tracking, and Xbox Controller Move, can be adjusted to an individual user's needs on the fly. This driver is free to download and is only available to users who use Steam VR headsets and applications. Hardware. Accessibility, disabilities, and virtual reality solutions. This article gives an overview on various companies that are working to create accessible XR devices. They cite Microsoft's strides in the field with the haptic cane controller for the blind and visually impaired, Seeing VR for those with low vision, and the Braille controller extension for an Xbox controller. They also cite usage in hospitals and the use of VR for relieving pain and offering palliative care to patients. Meeting with the Office of Disability Resources. After gathering my research, I met with Amy White, the director of the Office of Disability Resources on campus. The purpose of meeting with her was to establish a connection between her office and Studio X for future collaboration, but also for me to gather data about how we could adapt our programming and services to be more accessible. We discussed how we might make the space itself more accessible, some of which involves staff and marketing policies. Adding a training session on disability awareness to prepare staff on how to handle any situation that may arise could be crucial to making the space inclusive. When marketing events in the future, it was suggested that we include some language about how our workshops are accessible to let people know they are welcome and encouraged to attend our events. Previously, Amy had sent me a list of the disabilities represented on our campus, so I asked her in detail about the ways in which the Disabilities Office provided accommodations for each. After taking note of this base data, I asked her where we should focus our efforts to start making accommodations. It was recommended that we start by finding ways in which people with sensory disabilities can experience XR technology, as the technology is mostly reliant on sight and sound. Making Intro to XR more accessible. With this new feedback in mind, I began reworking my Intro to XR workshop, a staple presentation that's given multiple times a semester at Studio X and is one of our most popular workshops. Starting with my base presentation, I thought about ways in which the presentation could be elaborated upon more for those who are unable to see the slides. This would involve describing the photos on the slides when necessary. Beyond that change, the presentation was already pretty accessible, as we typically read the slide, then elaborated with more description. The real challenge was finding accessible XR experiences, as a main portion of the workshop is a hands-on experience. I played through each of the experiences listed on the screen, with the sound off while seated, and took notes of any accessibility features that the applications already had in place. Some interesting things I discovered during this playthrough is that Beat Saber allows you to customize the color of the note blocks, and Epic Roller Coasters provides a virtual helmet to limit your field of view to reduce motion sickness. Accessibilities Survey. We ran an accessibility survey for about 1 week, run through the Office of Disability Resources mailing list. We received 6 responses. Although we were hoping for more information on how we could support patrons with sensory disabilities, most of the respondents reported not having a sensory disability. Despite this, we did get a handful of students who are willing to come into the space to participate in user testing, which would be a great help. Moving forward, the plan is to put together a user testing plan, and from that create an equally effective alternate access plan, EEAAP, based on the results from the testing. The DLF Toolkit that I mentioned earlier provides some resources on the creation of this document. Resources page for staff. We have a staff wiki that contains all the useful information that our team should know and have access to while working in the space. I created an accessibility section that acts as a cumulative guide for all the resources and information I've gathered over my semester of research. The wiki is split into 2 sections, resources and workshops. The Resources Wiki page links to my previously mentioned XR and Accessibilities blog post, as it serves as a good overview and a starting point for a staff reference. I also explain the process of how to get an interpreter for any events, classes, or workshops held in the space, as this could be vital for certain patrons' experiences. There is a section on experiences that have been identified as accessible by the VR disabilities community, and these applications will likely be a part of our user testing phase. There is a section on experiences about disabilities, allowing abled people to experience what it might be like to have certain conditions. Finally, there is a small section about various useful VR accessories that may be good for the space to have. The workshops section contains all the information about how to run the Intro to XR workshop mentioned previously, and contains room for the Blender and Unity workshops to be added later on. The resource is open to additions by all staff members, and I expect that it will grow in the following years. Updating the website. In addition to the staff resources page, I wanted to create some resources that were available to the public. With this in mind, I transferred bits and pieces of the staff wiki over to the resources page on the Studio X website, under the section titled XR and Accessibility. This publicly available resource has all of the content from the blog post in an easier to access format, along with a list of VR experiences about disabilities and accessible VR experiences. Another important resource linked on this page is the Zotero Library, an expansive resource of various articles, blog posts, and research papers that have been accumulated by the Studio X's Immersive Technologies librarian and other staff members. Reflection. While I have enjoyed working on this research project, it has been a frustrating process. Accessibilities is a topic that feels hard to approach as an abled person, and seeing the lack of care for disabilities in a field I love so much is a little saddening to see. There are so many articles out there about the possibilities for XR and accessibilities, yet there are little to no people who are actually trying to put these ideas into action. Of course, Microsoft is making progress with their research, but platforms like Unity and Blender, which are industry standard software for XR creators, have very few resources for the developers to keep accessibility in mind. There are very few experiences that are built to be accessible, and this is something that desperately needs to be worked on. I hate to be yet another voice saying, look at these possibilities, and not setting anything into motion, but I hope that by bringing a more direct light to the issue, I might help people to see why it's so important to keep universal design in mind when going about their XR endeavors. I feel optimistic by the efforts of groups like XR Access and those creators who center disabilities in their work.
Thank you to the Office of Disability Resources for being so collaborative and helpful in providing information for my research. Thank you as well to the students who participated in our surveys. And thank you for watching to learn about my research this semester.